The Midway invasion force was commanded by Admiral Nobutake Kondo. Its main body was made up of 2 battleships, 4 heavy cruisers, 1 light carrier, and 7 destroyers. Subordinate to Admiral Kondo was the Midway Occupation Force, commanded by Rear Admiral Raiso Tanaka. Tanaka had 12 transports with 5,000 troops and a screen of 1 light cruiser, 10 destroyers, and 3 patrol boats. At Guam in the Marianas was the Midway Support Force, under the command of Rear Admiral Takeo Kurita. Kurita had 4 heavy cruisers and 2 destroyers. As well as his Midway forces, Admiral Yamamoto had overall command of the Aleutians Fleet, based in the anchorage at Ominato on the northern island of the Japanese homeland. The northern force was made up of a carrier striking force with 1 heavy and 1 light carrier, 2 cruisers, and 3 destroyers. There was also an invasion fleet of 4 transports carrying 1,000 soldiers, accompanied by a 7-strong destroyer screen. With the Lexington sunk and Yorktown badly damaged in the Coral Sea, the US Pacific Fleet had been critically weakened. Yorktown went into dry dock in Pearl Harbor, with damage estimated to need at least 3 months to repair. In fact, the yards achieved near miraculous results. The job was done in 3 days, with 1,500 men working around the clock. Much minor damage had not yet been put right, and as the carrier sailed, scores of dockyard crew remained on board. Admiral Chester Nimitz, overall commander of the US Pacific Fleet, would stay in Pearl Harbor throughout the Battle of Midway, communicating with his ships by radio. Nimitz divided his carriers into 2 task forces. Task Force 17 was commanded by Admiral Frank Fletcher, veteran of the Coral Sea. Fletcher had Yorktown as his flagship, 2 cruisers and 6 destroyers. Fletcher also had operational command of Task Force 16, led by Admiral Raymond Spruance. Spruance had the carriers Enterprise and Hornet, along with 2 cruisers and 11 destroyers. From Pearl Harbor, Admiral Nimitz deployed 19 submarines for reconnaissance and attack, which would patrol off Midway and Hawaii. He would also call on aircraft based on the island of Midway itself. The US Army Air Force had 4 B-26 and 19 B-17E bombers. The Marines fielded 20 Buffalo and 7 Wildcat fighters. They also had 11 Vindicator and 16 Dauntless bombers. The Navy had 38 Catalinas and 6 TBF torpedo bombers. The island was also defended by the 6th Marine Defense Battalion of 3,000 men. On the morning of May the 27th, the Japanese carrier strike force under Admiral Nagumo sailed from Hashirajima. By nightfall, they had entered the Pacific and were heading for Midway. The following day, the Aleutians invasion force and the main body of warships sorted from Ominato. At the same time, far to the south, the Midway invasion force with its escort of destroyers and the invasion support force of heavy cruisers sorted from the Marianas. Last to leave port, on the 29th, were the invasion force main body and Yamamoto's fleet, each of battleships, cruisers and destroyers. Although Admiral Nimitz and his senior commanders knew that Midway was to be invaded, for security reasons, no one on the island was told that the mightiest concentration of naval power in history was bearing down upon them. Piecemeal, Midway's marine garrison was reinforced, and the island's anti-aircraft defences were strengthened. Every day, the Catalina flying boats patrolled the ocean around the island in greater numbers, although none of their crew yet knew precisely what they were searching for. The Japanese, too, had begun their reconnaissance effort. An advanced submarine force had been at sea for many days, racing towards Hawaii. Its task would be to set up a picket north of Pearl Harbor and report the strength of any American fleet dispatched to Midway. The submarines were, in fact, already too late. On May the 28th, Task Force 16 left Pearl Harbor unobserved, followed by Task Force 17 on the 30th. Both groups vanished into the Pacific Ocean, and the Japanese submarines, which would finally arrive on June the 3rd, would watch in vain. By June the 2nd, the Japanese Northern Force was ploughing its way through the North Pacific towards the Aleutians. The islands, although of immense strategic importance to the United States, were sparsely manned, the only forces of any consequence deployed at Dutch Harbor. The Americans, expecting the Japanese attack, flew repeated reconnaissance missions, but because of poor weather, failed to locate the enemy. The Japanese at first fared little better, but a second strike group did succeed in bombing Dutch Harbor. Over the following days, troops of the Special Naval Landing Force occupied Kiska and Attu. Although the Aleutians operation was, in tactical terms, a complete success, and the Japanese occupation of the islands would be a thorn in the American side for some time to come, the primary objective of the invasion had failed. The Americans, instead of dispatching strong naval forces north, away from Midway, ignored the diversion. A key element in the Japanese plan failed completely. While the Japanese Northern Force was launching its attack on the Aleutians, hundreds of miles to the south, Nagumo's carrier strike force was fast approaching Midway. 200 miles behind were Yamamoto's main force battleships, and steaming from the southwest, the Midway invasion fleet. With no cloud cover, the invasion flotilla was desperately exposed, and by now, Midway's Catalinas were sweeping a huge arc of ocean out to 700 miles, covering all the likely approaches to the island. It was on June the 3rd, at 09:04, that a Catalina made the first sighting of Japanese ships off Midway. The pilot reported 2 cargo vessels. 21 minutes later, another Catalina, flown by Ensign